Hi, so similar to the weapons of math instruction video, I am making this video away at a meet. I'm sitting in our team conference room, so hopefully it's a little quieter, but I just wanted to apologize for any background noise that may be encountered. But jumping into this assignment, first off, talking about Florence Nightingale. She's someone who I really had not researched to the full extent, but I really enjoyed learning about her. I wish I would have learned a little bit more about her sooner, but jumping into what idea was she trying to communicate with her visual? She was communicating through this diagram the causes of mortality for the Army of the East, was what the Rose diagram was titled. And this was a comparison of the death toll from infectious diseases to miscellaneous things such as injuries and just general causes of war. The chart shows just a shift over time, and it shows a drastic change after sanitary implementations were put in by officials, and the death toll significantly dropped from infectious diseases. So that was really interesting to see, just kind of the impact of the sanitary protocol and what that looked like. This feels like very second nature to us in modern society, but I know that was not what was happening at that time, and she really did take the initiative to communicate that, and she did a very effective job in doing so. What was her primary communication challenge is honestly during this time being a woman. I think there's not a lot of credibility to her in that sense. I think she was written off as an individual, as she was just a nurse. It wasn't really looked at for someone of this level of advice. I know there was a discussion of there was a committee that she had kind of helped make, and she was not allowed to serve on the committee as she was a female. Do I think her communication style was effective? I do. I felt as though she was able to productively communicate her intended purpose. The graph showed a significant change. I think it was very attention grabbing. It was very easy to read and navigate. In my opinion, I think it was a very clear and effective means of communication. For me personally, I was appalled by the conditions that they had talked about, and I think it's amazing that she had kind of taken the initiative to get this going. So second, looking at Minard's, his idea he was trying to communicate was the progress of Napoleon's army during the Russian campaign. His graph showed the number of men in his army, their movements, as well as the temperature they encountered on the return path. So the number of men present was represented by the width of the colored zones. The red designates the men who entered Russia, and the black designates those who leave it. I feel as though this was communicating how temperature kind of led to those deaths, but what the video did a really good job of referring to is what the visual does not show. It does not show the lack of supplies or the general implementations of war. And there was also a note that we don't know specifically what he was aiming to communicate, as he had passed shortly after the publication of this visual. So that was kind of interesting to know that we don't really know what he was going after, but there's just some infers that are made. His primary communication challenge, I think this style, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the effectiveness of the graphic, is that the way the information was presented is really helpful, that the army was moving from east to west, talking about how things read left to right, and how this moving in that way was really helpful, as when it showed the second visual that was not structured in that way, it was not as easy to follow, and it actually was not popular at all. I do feel the graphic overall is very effective. It's very modern. It has a good representation of using the size of the line to show population and also showing the direction. Third, looking at Dubois, his idea he was trying to communicate was he was working with this convention going on in Paris, and he was communicating what the African American population looked like in the 1900 version of America. So he showed the progression of this demographic, I think it was 40 years after the end of slavery. So that was an interesting thing, as he wanted to defy stereotypes that African Americans faced, and he exposed limitations that have been put on their progress. So a communication challenge for Dubois is probably his demographic he was a part of. I think it's amazing that he got the government backing as this went over to Paris. I was happy to hear about that, but I think domestically that could have been a problem. His graphics were very straightforward. It was basically built so that any education level could interpret them, and I think that's really effective, as it also is helpful for the demographic that it was about may not have had a high education level. So it was easy to interpret from all angles. So I really did enjoy that about his visualizations. So going into what individual is my favorite, I would say probably Dubois. I really appreciate his motive for going into this situation and really wanting to defy the stereotypes of African Americans. And pairing this question with my favorite visualization, I go back to Nightingale's rose diagram. I think this diagram is very effective in showing the success of sanitation methods being implemented. I think this was a very dire matter at the time. The death toll was astonishing. Infectious disease, the spread of diseases was really out of control with spiraling, and I think she did a really good job visualizing the change in the sanitation methods and the direct result on the death toll. I know there was also some dispute talking about if her information, when it was presented in a bar graph, there was less variance in the way it's presented in the rose diagram. I am interested to kind of look into that more, but where I still favor her as a statistician and a visual presenter is that I admire her admiration as a woman. I think she really persevered through some hard things that were faced in being a woman during that time, so I do admire her for that. I also think she was admirable in that she ethically saw that the death toll rising was very preventable, and changing that took a couple tangible fixes. And also, I know there was kind of a dispute on saying that there was just less going on I think it was just reference to like less, the people coming in were in a better space or they were healthier, so that could kind of contradict what her visual was showing, but overall I would say that is my favorite. But yeah, again, I really enjoyed listening to these videos, looking at the visuals. It's really interesting to see just kind of how the beginnings of visuals and where we've gotten today, and seeing some similarities in those. It was really interesting to continue to learn about. So yeah, thank you.